he'll wear a rainbow armband during the Qatar World Cup.
You were saying the other week about that hot cold empathy gap.
So you would fear for your life if, as
my personal opinion on it, I'm sure there's a lot of people that disagree with me.
Cheers, welcome.
Oh, shit. Cheers, mate.
I was about to say happy birthday then. I don't know what.
Happy 8th birthday. Yeah. How you been?
Yeah, all right, mate. All right. I think I feel normal from my Ibiza. 100%. It's been a couple of weeks now. And yeah, that's pretty much it. How have you been?
All good. I got a few messages from people after the last episode saying it's the best one yet.
Oh, what about the All Blacks thing, like specifically?
Yeah. No, just the whole episode. I got told I sounded very intelligent.
Oh, fucking that's the first.
But in the same sentence, I was told, but I know the real stupid git inside. So, well, backhanded. But yeah, I got a few messages actually from people. I don't know if you saw, I posted Chappie on when I posted the episode thing, I put his quote in there. But I got messaged by 3 people, so yeah, we're reaching an audience.
Friends of the podcast.
But current events, this is quite a good one I wanted to speak about anyway. But Harry Kane, I don't know if you saw, England and Harry Kane released a statement this week or last week basically saying he'll wear a rainbow armband during the Qatar World Cup.
Oh, well,
so to separate
gay pride.
Yeah. And he obviously came out and said that. I think a lot of the teams are doing that. And I wanted to speak about the Qatar World Cup anyway because it's been marred by loads of controversies and stuff. Back from when they first actually got it, you know, Sepp Blatter, the corrupt fuck. He was sacked or suspended from FIFA. He was the FIFA president when Qatar got awarded the World Cup, right? He was sacked for like accepting bribes, I think, or something to do with money. So he's corrupt anyway. And he came out later even and said he regretted giving the World Cup to Qatar, but I'm sure he didn't regret it at the time because I imagine he was getting financially rewarded for such. But there was allegations. This is just how they got the World Cup. There was allegations from someone who actually worked within that Qatar sort of World Cup bid. She came out and said that they had paid like 1.5 million to several African nations to get their vote to host the World Cup. And obviously African countries, you don't have to ask twice to bribe them. Apparently there was a guy called like Jack Warner or something who was North America, and I think North America, Jamaica, someone else. He was the president of their football. Apparently he's been sacked since from his role, but apparently he also received $2 million into his account from a Qatar-based firm that was involved in funding their bid. So there was a lot of backhanders, a lot of bribes, etc. to actually get it put there, which is fairly normal, but it's still poor, but it's fairly normal in terms of how these things happen. Usually the country that hosts the World Cup has paid off a fuck ton of people to get it. That's fairly normal, but still poor. But with Qatar, what's different is, have you heard about all like the human rights stuff with the slavery, etc.?
Yeah, literally just saying. Did you see? Is it Denmark? Joe Hummel, the sports brand. Hummel. It's like Hummel.
Maybe, I don't know.
It's actually weirdly enough, when you messaged me about it, it come up on my Instagram that they've blacked out, or they're not making their logo as prominent on the top. Is it? I think it's Denmark.
Yes. You mean Denmark football?
Yeah, Denmark football.
Yes, I heard about that.
Yeah, and they're like as a stand against like them abusing human rights and all things like that.
Yes, I did hear about that. Countries have taken different stances, all of which are relevant. Like that thing that you just mentioned. Is Qatar going to lose any sleep over that? Probably not. The people who can actually do something aren't really doing anything. Like the actual countries are taking a stand. I think there's an Australian footballer who's gay who spoke out publicly and said, I fear for my life playing in the Qatar World Cup. I'm openly a gay man. Being gay is still illegal in that country. So people are doing things. Harry Kane with the rainbow armband, etc. They're doing these notions of goodwill, but not really changing anything. But with the human rights stuff, when they first got the bid accepted, just for some backstory, between like 2010 and 2013, there was like loads of cases of accusations made of migrant workers basically saying that their passports and identity information was taken from them, their mobile phones taken from them. They were deprived of like food and water, and they were forced to work, wages withheld. So they got these migrants in on work visas and said, you'll be working on this, blah blah, we'll pay you X. Once they get into the country, they take away their technology, their identification, aren't paying them the money they're owed, and are forcing them to work free labour. It's slavery basically, and you can't really escape a place like that. Like, even if you escape where you're living, the police will pick you up and bring you back. Like, it's a corrupt area. So there was loads of cases of that, loads, and there was loads of deaths. Like, you know, Nepal, the country, there was loads of migrants from Nepal that ended up dying, something like 500. There were like 700 during that period, 700 Indians.
Sorry to interrupt you. You're talking about when there's building all these stadiums, like trying to build the infrastructure to have the World Cup. Yeah, fair. Sorry, I didn't know if you was talking about prior to this.
Oh yeah, so during that period, just after they got the bid accepted, when they started construction and stuff, and there was like 700 Indian migrants who had died during that same period working on these stadiums, etc. And I think Amnesty International, do you know who they are? They're like a human rights organisation around the world. They investigated it and basically accused Qatar publicly of what they had done in terms of withholding basically slavery. And even in 2015, there was a case of, there was a big earthquake in Nepal, and all of the Nepalese immigrants that were working in there were denied visitation to go back home and see their families, because of course they worried if they leave they're not coming back type thing, so they weren't allowed to go and see their families. So all human rights stuff like that, terrible. They then signed an agreement in like 2017 that they would treat human beings like human beings, even migrants.
As if you need to be signing an agreement.
Yeah, because it got too much. And in 2016, Amnesty International really tried to do something about it, and all the nations around the world started piping up, but actually doing fuck all. But eventually they signed an agreement, and in 2019, Amnesty International come out and said they've signed an agreement to say that they'll stop doing these things. We've investigated and literally can show you thousands of cases of them still doing these things. There's still deaths. There's still passports, identity information, etc. being withheld, etc. So that's the human rights stuff. To make matters worse, this is a bad one. Right? I didn't know about this before. I read about it this week. In like 2017, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Yemen, and I think the UAE all removed themselves from Qatar, distanced themselves, and said we want nothing to do with Qatar anymore, and accused them of like funding terrorism, etc., and having backward views and operating in non-legal ways. If those countries that I've just named are distancing themselves from you and saying you do things wrongly and you fund terrorism, etc., that's when you know it's bad, right? Because that's like the pot calling the kettle black. So all of those nations decided that Qatar, and they actually wrote a letter to FIFA saying we think it's a massive mistake letting a nation like that host a World Cup. So that's from nations like that. That's pretty bad, right? And then you've got the obvious ones, right? Which is, as a woman in Qatar and in those nations, it is backward. However you want to call it, they follow Sharia law, which is backward. You don't have the same rights as a woman. If you cheat on your husband, you can get a public flogging, you can get stoned to death, and you can spend time in prison. Cheating on your husband's not great, but death, don't think it warrants it. It's still illegal to be gay, and being gay is punishable by death, by stoning, beheading, etc. So you then have the obvious ones like what I've just mentioned, but all of that together, and you can't drink there as well, which I found pretty interesting.
I read something about that though. This it's public drinking. I think they're going to change the rules to, if you're in, like, I think if you're inside a stadium's ground, or you obviously if you're on a resort, you're allowed to do it anyway. Resorts are, but yeah, I think they're slightly changing the rules. Well, I say slightly, they're still not actually, because there's no public intoxication. That's if you're. That's what's gonna like fuck. Like a lot of football fans, you see it any other tournament, they're battered walking out of the stadium. Because yeah, I read something. If you're like pissed when you're walking out of the stadium, you could still be then. Yeah. If you do something stupid, if you fall over, like I say fall over, that's probably an extreme example. If you're
but drunk and disorderly. Yeah. What they've done, it's not even in stadiums. You're still not allowed. So I was watching, Gary Neville. He does the overlap stuff, right? He was speaking to a Qatar official who's involved in all of that stuff, and he basically asked him about what's allowed. There'll be certain fan zones designated where you can drink, and that's it, right? You can't drink in the stadium. You can't drink in the street. You can only drink if you're in one of these fan zones. And obviously, if you're going to the game, the fan zones are going to be full by the time you leave from fans that aren't actually in the game. So what, you're going to the game and you're going home. And Neville basically said, why are you not allowing fans to drink in the stadium? And he said, we're an Islamic state, it's not part of our culture and tradition. Right, and that was interesting to me because someone also asked, when I was researching it this week, there was also something else about an official, the question was raised to the official about why being gay is still illegal. And it was the same answer word for word. We're an Islamic state, it's not in our cultural tradition. And I'm of the view, I'll get your thoughts on this in a minute after I finish but I'm of the view, if you're opening the world up to come into your country for a World Cup, your culture and tradition it doesn't matter. You're getting 40 nations, the fans of 40 nations, you're inviting them into your nation by hosting the World Cup where their team is playing, and you're telling them you have to follow our culture and tradition. Not being funny, in the UK, is having halal meat part of the UK's tradition and culture? No. Is having mosques and other religious temples from other religions in the UK part of our culture? No, it's not. But when you open your doors to immigration and when you open your doors to other people's cultures, you allow them to have that culture within your country, right? So why is it that so many other countries in the world allow other religions, cultures and other countries' cultures into theirs, but they can't? And then finally, I think, what are your thoughts on the World Cup being hosted there after all that I've just said there? Like, should it be being hosted there?
I knew, like, from the start, but as soon as they got it, there was, like, instantly there was rumours about how, like, they done, like, under the table deals and things like that to get it. But I suppose it's kind of, it is I can't think of the phrase for it, but they are technically well within their rights to refuse these things. It's their country. They can do what they want. They set their own laws. But yeah, at the same time, it's like, well, then don't host a tournament like that if you don't want to be accepting of other cultures. But then that goes down, I think that just goes back to FIFA and, like, obviously showing how fucked up it is or how corrupt it is, the fact that they've allowed a tournament to go. I don't know enough about the rules of where the World Cup, but surely FIFA have the ability to just, even if they get most of the votes, FIFA as a board have, like, the ability to be like, no, it's not being hosted there because it won't fit the culture of football.
Yeah, I agree with that point on solely drinking. But where you say, it's their country, they're well within their rights to have their own rules and laws, I don't think they are. Like, being gay is still being an illegal crime punishable by death. Like, that isn't okay. And their answer is often, when questions are raised about drinking or the fact that you're not allowed to be gay or the fact that women are seen as less than men, etc., is that it's our culture, it's our tradition, blah blah blah. But in the year 2022, there's a thing called human rights, and with an organisation like Amnesty International, they don't just look at one country or govern one country; they look at it across the whole world. So I get that it's their country, it's not our culture, etc. But you've got to change with the time at some point. Like, having being gay as a legal crime punishable by death isn't okay. Like, they shouldn't just be able to, it's their country, they can have those laws. Is that okay? Like,
oh no, I wasn't agreeing with the whole being gay and, like, the women's rights thing. I was talking about the whole drinking thing. Yeah. The fact that it's up to them in that sense. But those, I suppose, the being gay and the women's rights is a wider issue that goes a bit beyond a World Cup, having a World Cup there, because I know it'll get brought in the spotlight a lot more, but the World Cup is what goes on for is it a month it goes on for in total? Yeah. So yeah, in the grand scheme of things, like, it's a tiny snip, and that's not going to change because of one tournament. They're obviously very stubborn culture in that sense. Yeah, no, that's obviously, it's a very backwards country in that sense. It's hard to, I don't know enough about the law. You just look at it from our point of view and how we live and that, and you think, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And then there obviously are people fighting for those rights, and activists, that's the word I was looking for. But then I think a lot of those cultures as well, it's as awful as it sounds, they are so accustomed to it. It's almost like, what you don't know, They don't know any different unless they go to visit another country and see how different it is, and then that's when they're like, oh shit, like my country's actually really fucked up. And it's then they might like go somewhere else, go to live somewhere else, and then become an activist for it. But yeah, it's like that's how they live their life, fucked up as it may be. Gay people, it's different in that sense. Like, you can't choose whether or not, like, if you're gay kind of thing. It's not like you can't choose being a woman either. But you know, like, if you're a woman in that culture, you know what your life's going to be, sort of thing. You don't have to hide the fact that you're a woman. But yeah, if you're like, mate, I actually watched a program with Tom Daly. It was about the Commonwealth Games, and a lot of the countries that are in the Commonwealth Games, it's still illegal to be gay there. And he went around like talking to athletes in it, and they were all hiding their identities. And some of the stories they were telling, like, it was fucked. One of them saying that he watched one of his boyfriends. I could be misquoting this, but watched one of his boyfriends or someone that he knew got like beaten to death, and he didn't even come out. Someone just accused him, and he basically, like, he didn't have a way of denying it. In a sense, he didn't like have a way to disprove it or anything. Yeah. So he got like beaten to death.
That's the thing, and I just think, like you say, it's nothing's going to change. That's their rules. It's the rules they've always lived by. But I just then don't think that an organisation like FIFA should be giving them that exposure. You know, hosting a World Cup that probably billions around the world are going to watch at some point. You're giving that country exposure. Like when South Africa hosted it, I only know because I'm South African, but the amount hosting that World Cup benefited the country was madness. The tourism that it attracted, the revenue that the country was able to generate, airlines down to like local shops on the beach, etc. It really, really helped it. And we're giving that country money, exposure, etc. on the TV around the world. And you shouldn't be giving it exposure to a country like that, in my opinion, unless they do tone down or change a couple of rules. Because what you said, that is how they've always lived. And who are you to go in and tell them to do otherwise? And I get that. We shouldn't go and tell them to do otherwise. But at the same time, we should not then be exposing their country to the rest of the world and giving them that limelight.
But yeah, like you said, you shouldn't be giving the exposure. Don't give it the time of day. Like, don't give them the time of day. And like wait for like the good work to be done before you start.
100%. Like, look what's happening with Russia at the moment with their invasion of Ukraine. I mean, that was in the news massively this week as well, because they've started sending missiles and stuff again. But countries around the world are boycotting Russian. They're not buying oil and petrol from Russian companies. You had all this stuff with the Russian oligarchs in England, like Roman Abramovich, Chelsea's owner, etc., getting sanctioned, getting their funds seized, etc. We're doing all this to Russia because they're going against human rights. Like some of the stuff you've heard of Russian invasions into, did you hear the other week that the Ukrainians liberated one of their cities that had been under Russian hands since the invasion? They found like mass graves, just like World War II concentration camp type things, mass graves where hundreds of bodies were pushed into a hole and mud was pushed over them. And that's people they were killing. They found torture chambers, etc. Right? They're committing human rights violations, and the whole world, apart from like China, I think, and maybe some of the Middle East, are boycotting them. Yet there's a country here in Qatar that is known for human rights issues and their laws being slightly backward and killing and taking legal working migrants as slaves, etc. And nothing's happening. They're hosting the World Cup that's going to get tons of viewership, whereas Russia's getting kicked out. They're not playing the Champions League, Russian teams. They've, like went the Nations League, that crap competition. None of the Russian fixtures are being played against other nations. Even if you look back at South Africa during apartheid era where we had segregation and stuff, the rest of the world wouldn't play us at sport. The rest of the world didn't want to conduct business with us, again, apart from a couple of countries. The Springboks weren't allowed to play any other nation. When New Zealand came to us to play the Springboks, they weren't allowed to do it as the All Blacks. They just made a club. They made a club called like Cavaliers or something, and they travelled, and it's not an official test because you were not allowed to compete with South Africa. We weren't allowed to be in World Cups, in rugby, cricket, football, not that they make it in football. And that was because of the stuff that was going on in that country at the time, right? And I just find it I just find it strange how with Qatar it's just a case of look the other way and do nothing, you know?
Turn a blind eye to it. I suppose I'm getting a bit like conspiracy theory about it, but then it just boils down to money. And they're like, it is oil, isn't it, in Qatar? It is oil money in Qatar, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, you control so much of the world economy with that, and what goes on in the world, whereas South Africa didn't have that.
No. We were rich at the time. Look what happened to. We had gold. That was our thing. And after we let countries come in, same like, you know, when the stuff happened in Afghanistan and Britain and America got involved. The same thing happened to South Africa. Once the ANC took over and they allowed foreign people into our land, big companies took all our gold and sold it. So it was the same.
But I suppose nowadays gold isn't as, even if you was doing a comparison, gold isn't as valuable as a commodity as it is like as oil is. Yeah, no, maybe that is. It's just the fact that, and is it almost, I don't know, but like, is it from like a political point of view that it's not as close to home, so people don't care as much about it? Like in this West, that's the Eastern world. This is the Western world sort of thing, and this where Africa is, South Africa is part of the Commonwealth and that as well, isn't it? So it's like it's got that ties to England. England's such like a big global power that it can't be seen to be letting countries that are tired of it. And then they've got to say something, and then other countries are like, we will say something, and that gets like rained down on it. But I'm just kind of making a lot of assumptions here. I don't fucking do too much politics and that. But is it because it's such that's like the Middle East sort of thing? It's the same reason. It's the same thing. Like everyone would say, China's fucked up. Everyone knows like they do fucked up things, but no one's trying to stop them from doing it, are they?
Yeah, and do you know what I think it boils down to a lot? And this is bad from like first world countries as well. With South Africa, there was a population that was majority black, being led by a white minority at those times in terms of the government, right? There was someone that the Western world could come in and save, right? Same as like Afghanistan, when stuff happened there was oil in that country, and the US and UK then invaded, and funnily enough came out of it with a lot of oil, and they were saving and liberating the country. I think with China, they can't do that. China's powerful. They can't go in there and save the people because A, they'd lose, but also China are too powerful and they're an ally. And with Qatar, what's the difference between Qatar, Dubai, and like Afghanistan and Iran? They've got money and these guys don't. So they could come in and do it to Afghanistan and liberate the country and save them from terrorism or Saddam Hussein and all of that sort of stuff. Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden. They can invade these countries, but you can't invade a country like China or Qatar or Dubai because they're powerhouses. They have just as much money as you, similar resources. Same as South Africa back in the day. They didn't have the same resources, so countries could boycott them and eventually come in and try and make a difference, etc. And perhaps it is that. So they just think, well, what are we going to do? We'll keep them as allies or keep trading with them for oil, etc. And they don't want to sort of muddy the waters in terms of, now that we're not buying oil from Russia, we need oil from other sources, etc. And maybe it does boil down to that. And it is very much about the money. You said a minute ago, it's massively about the money and the corruption. But what I find funny is like the guy who was the head of the North American and like Jamaican Football Association who took that bribe, he's now no longer in his job. A lot of the leaders of the football organisations when I was doing my research in those African countries that accepted bribes are no longer in the job. Seb Blatter, who accepted bribes as FIFA president, none of these guys are actually in charge anymore. But they're the ones that made this happen 12, 15 years ago when they accepted all the bribes. And now they're no longer involved. It's up to the people who came in after them to try and deal with all this shit. And those guys have just fucking sailed off into the sunset with their millions.
Yeah, it's like, who was it done Brexit? David Cameron. Called for a referendum and then fucked off.
Because he thought he'd win. He thought we'd remain.
But, yeah, I suppose it is. Does it just? There's a political agenda behind everything, isn't there?
And do you know what the worst thing is? Right, I've sat here and I've said about how terrible I think it is and what Qatar do I think is terrible. Am I still going to watch the World Cup? Yes. Am I still going to go out? And this is the thing: is a lot of people will be very outraged and disgusted about what Qatar do and about how it's been allowed to happen. But we're all still going to watch the World Cup because who's not going to watch the World Cup? So they're still going to make money out of it and. you know, I'm calling for maybe the organisations and the people who actually have power to do something about it, because obviously we can't. But I'm still going to watch it at the end of the day, and so will I think pretty much everyone else. So it doesn't actually make a difference.
A country's not getting involved because it's like the country see it as a game of football, not what that country's doing as a whole. But you said about South Africa when they had the segregation, no one was playing them at sport. So yeah, it does. There does need to, but then you haven't actually seen any governments. Like no countries got involved. It's just a few footballers piping up saying.
It's football organisations.
I say piping up's the wrong word, isn't it? But yeah, football organisations. But then has anyone actually dropped out of it?
No, Russia were forced out.
Yeah, I see in a lot of cities in France, they're not playing it at all, are they? There are no public showings.
Oh, really?
They'll probably play it on TV still, like if someone wants to watch it in their own like private home. But yeah, they're not allowing fan zones. They're not playing in any public places. I can't remember the name of the cities.
Doing things like that would actually make a difference. Like what France are doing there, fucking pin in the ocean, it will make absolutely no difference. If every country around the world, though, announced publicly, we're not showing this in pubs, we're not showing this in stadiums, blah, blah, blah. If you want to watch it, you can go at home. We don't agree with it. That is something that would actually make a difference, because FIFA would then have to be like, oh, fuck. Like, we've got a problem here. We're going to use that on TV viewership and revenue. If fans or airlines said, we're not flying people from the UK to Qatar, you can get a ferry somewhere else and fly from there because we're not having any part of it, blah, blah, blah. If companies actually come out and did these things, FIFA would have to do something, but unfortunately that won't happen. So, especially not a couple of months away.
There's too much money in it for that to happen. It's the knock-on effects, I suppose, if you go, if airlines were to stop doing it, and then does that have like a implication on a year-round sort of thing? It's like, do then Qatar stop as much tourism going in, and businesses, does it have a bigger effect on? And like, it's fucking, you'd assume like it is just down to money in it. It's the reason they've got it evidently is the fact that they've got, whether or not they bidded for it fairly or not, and they got it, it's because they've got the most money. The country, they had like no infrastructure to be able to play.
Yeah.
Did they have like even one stadium?
God, no. I mean, they've got a few football clubs, but I really don't know. But literally, most of the stadiums that are going to be hosting games at the World Cup have been built. And what you just said there it's completely down to money. And again, with the airlines, if an airline took a stand and said, we're not going to be flying to Qatar, cool. Buy EasyJet, we're going with TUI, or we're going with BA, we're going with Qatar Airways. No businesses will take a stand, because they'll then think, well, we're not going to make the money and everyone else is. Like, same with what you said about, I'm surprised that France thing, because say a pub was like, right, I'm standing with my morals, I'm not showing this. Cool, the pub 4 doors down is going to get all your customers and everyone's going to go there and they're going to make money. So that's not going to happen. And say, for example, a football organisation from a certain country came out and said, we are not playing at this World Cup. No one would ever do that, because they'd think, what if every other country plays? They don't want to be the only one to do it. So from a business point of view, from a footballing point of view, from a nation's point of view, no one will come out and do anything because someone else is going to make money when you don't, type of thing. And it does all boil down to money, which is a shame.
It's funny how people's morals fly out the window, isn't it? When there's a bit of cash involved, there needs to be that bigger stand from collectively. Maybe it needs to become more of a political issue. But then it is a political issue going to be solved in the space of when did they find out they got it?
It's like 2008.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
I mean, though the human rights stuff started coming out between 2010 and 2013, and that's when they started building the stadium. So they must have found out before then. You know, I think they do like 3 in advance or something. Like, we know the next 2 World Cup destinations after Qatar, I think. Same with Rugby World Cup, you know, the next couple, I think, but yeah.
Weird thing, innit? I say it's just a fucked up thing. I don't follow, I don't know enough. And maybe that's just from like a side of ignorance, that it is because it's the other side of the world. It's like, does it affect me personally? No.
One other thing I saw as well about like the pride flag type thing is that stewards and like security in stadiums will be taking any pride propaganda off of people in the stadium. And they were obviously slated for it, and one of their officials came out and was like, no, they've given the okay. They had to give the okay. Apparently England football said we'd be wearing rainbow armbands, regardless of whether they said yes or not. But apparently they came out and said other nations can wear the rainbow armbands if they want. They've given the okay for that, but they said they'd be taking any propaganda off normal people, and they were then slated for that, and they were like, no, it's not because of our beliefs. We've given the okay for it. It's to stop any fighting happening. If local residents see pride stuff and end up attacking the people, blah, 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 it's for their own safety. And I was just thinking, Christ, like...
That's fucked up, the sense... Even if there's any truth to that, though, that's fucked up, the fact that they actually have to do something like that. Just stop like, fucking, riots breaking out and that.
We should go down there a few men deep with pride flags and just be, let's have it.
You would get fucked up. Like.
Yeah, you would. You can get put in prison for nothing. Like, you can get put in prison because you look at someone the wrong way. It's not fucking England. You don't have rights, etc. We used to work with a lady who was from Iran, and she said, like, yeah, I've been arrested. All my family's been arrested for putting stuff. They sometimes don't even tell you what for. They just hold you for a few days and leave you. And let you go because they don't like the look of you. Or like her, she had a British passport, so she had travelled back to see her family on her British passport. They'd detain her for a few days, say nothing because she's British, because she's a woman not wearing the stuff, and that would be on her way. She said she's been beaten by police, etc., and it's just normal. So have most of her family.
Like I said earlier, obviously that woman knows what it's like because she's got a British passport and that. But if you grow up in that sort of culture, it's like I said, you don't know what you don't know, and it's how fucked up is it that's their life. If they never venture out of any of those sort of what's the law? The like exact surely I can't say it. But if they never venture outside of any countries that are under that sort of, they never know any sort of difference, and I can't imagine they get to scroll Facebook and shit like that too much.
Everything's censored. It's like, it's not quite as extreme as like North Korea, because obviously people who are born in the Qatar are actually free to leave and work elsewhere if they please, etc. But it's similar like in North Korea, because everything's so censored and it's a dictatorship. Again, not quite the same, but the residents there, it's not really funny, but it is sort of funny. Have you ever heard of like seen documentaries of people who have escaped and they tell stories about what's drummed into them, the propaganda, like only watching films that are about the King Jong-un or whatever his name and his family and his dynasty, and not being able to see anything from the Western world. So you'd grow up thinking this is normal life. So you would fear for your life if, as a person who felt you're attracted to men or a woman, gay, whatever, you'd fear for your life, and you would think it's normal. I'm not normal to have, and it's fucking crazy. 2022. I always say that when we speak about these sort of things. 2022, I can't believe that this stuff still goes on. And it's not even just the Middle East. Obviously, you get shit that happens in China. They've got concentration camps in China for Muslims, I think. Russia had concentration camps for gays. The Middle East has these issues. Africa has their own fucking issues as well. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it is that ignorance is bliss sort of thing, isn't it? That, because it's not happening on my front door. But then, as it sounds quite awful thing to say, but like, what can we do about it apart from, fair enough, like maybe you could become an activist or something, part of one of these groups. But the only thing is until like higher ups, like actual countries, start trying to make an impact. But then it's like, what are the implications of just go down? Like, you turn around to some fucking massive geezer and be like, I think you're a cunt, by the way. You're pretty just gonna get smacked in the face. It's obviously it's a little bit more delicate than that, innit? But countries will retaliate because they're like, like you said, who are you to tell me what to do? Yeah. And it's a little bit more complicated, isn't it? I'm not saying I have any of the answers because I don't. No. But yeah, I think,
like you just said, I think obviously organisations need to do things. What everyone's doing to Russia at the moment, boycotting them completely, not buying their supplies, etc. Why not do that to other countries that are facing human rights issues? Because that actually makes a difference. They'll act like it doesn't, and they'll probably act like fuck the Western world like they do already. But it would make an effect on these countries if powerhouses like UK, France, Germany, US, Canada said like this, we're not buying any more produce from this country until you fucking answer some of these issues that are happening. Yeah, will it happen? Probably not, but that's what would make a difference. Because do activists make a difference? No. Like, you can't be an activist in that country, and this is what annoys me. I've said on a previous podcast before, when people who live in this country talk about oppression here, except blah blah blah, there are countries in the world where this shit happens, where you actually can't be an activist for gay rights in Qatar because you'd get thrown in prison, publicly flogged or killed. Do you know what I mean? So activists won't do anything. Same as when the shit happened with Russia. I remember seeing people protest outside the Russian embassy in England or something, and I just thought, and what's that doing? Like, you know, I think something needs to be done higher up, but it won't, and we're still going to watch the World Cup in a couple of months. Well, next month, actually.
Yeah, it starts, is 20th of November, first game? Yeah. Yeah, no, it's right, and that's, until someone comes into power, it's, I suppose, if you used to use South Africa, again, an example, like Nelson Mandela, he had quite a big impact on that sort of stuff, didn't he?
Good for the country. Yeah. And then, actually, the one after him as well, the president we had after him was decent as well. He's on the panel for, like, the African nations, and I see him sometimes do speeches just saying how badly everything's run in Africa and how things can be improved. But then after them two, it went completely down the pan. So it's terrible now. But
these episodes are getting a little bit.
Well, this is the thing though. We were speaking about the news like earlier. When you watch the news and stuff that's in the news, you're not really seeing many positive stories. What have we had? We had that woman who worked in a hospital that was killing babies. If you've heard about that. That was in the UK.
That was ages ago, wasn't it?
But she's going through like court now or something. So that's been in the news loads. We've had the Russia stuff attacking Ukraine again with missiles, etc. There's not really much in the news at the moment that makes one very happy, to be honest. Right, you know, rising costs of living, etc. Politics being shit. So when you look for topics of discussion, there's not many rainbows and happinesses to be found.
If all you ever do is feed yourself negative shit. That's actually, I said it on another podcast, didn't we, about how people react more to negative news than they do positive news. But do you remember I said the thing about a baby will stare at an angry face up to 10 times longer than a happy one? And that's where media gets the traction as well. And although there's probably a lot of truths into like what, I'm not specifically talking about like the Qatar stuff, there's a lot of truths in what the media say. Everyone knows shit gets blown out of proportion.
Of course.
It's fucking, you take celebrities and what they do, for example, they get a snapshot of someone like hasn't done their hair or something that day and it fucking drug addict. It's like the geezers just
coming back home after a 4-day bender.
Yeah, it's like fucking they just gone to like put their bins out or something. It is. There is just it's a lot of. That's why that's one of the reasons I don't ever read the news. I looked at it today to try and find like more topics to talk about, and I was on there for like 10 minutes. I was like, fucking hell, this is actually. I was just like, I don't want to look at this anymore. When I pop round my nan's sometimes, and she loves watching the news. I sit there, I'm like, Nan, you've got to change the channel. It's just fucking...
Put on the omnibus. EastEnders omnibus.
I'd actually rather watch that. That's how much I don't like the news. I'd rather watch EastEnders omnibus. It's fucking... It's every... Like, I think as well, it's turned into a bit of like a negativity bias. All you ever do is begin to see negative things. It's like, okay, well, so all the media you get put in front of you, all the media you consume is negative. So then you just look at the world in more of a negative light, and you think, okay, everything's negative now. You never you never become a glass half full sort of person.
It's true. Like, I think the media, like you said, it thrives off negativity and crime and stuff that's wrong with the world and bad stuff that's happening because it gets more views and it gets more clicks. If you've got a couple of journalists who work for a paper, and one of them wants to run a story about a fucking man who's been saving stray cats and stray puppies, or a man who's been brutally murdering people for the last 10 years on a killing spree, what's going to be on the front page? Like, the happy story or the sad story? Always the sad, always the bad, because it gets more clicks. You take, not news necessarily, but like Good Morning Britain and This Morning and shows like that are on weekday mornings, they are a good example of people who get on negatives and positives. They'll get on people for happy stories. They'll get celebrities for updates.
Sorry, I've been holding it since I pressed. Sorry, Billy. Continue your point. Talking about Good Morning Britain. Break over.
So they're a good example of people who get on they'll get on people who have done stupid shit, bad shit, criminals or ex-criminals, people who work with charities, happier stories, etc. They get on a real range to discuss with them and interview. But when you look at like their YouTube channels after, where they upload all these clips, if you have like someone who did a good deed or someone who works for charity who's on there, and then some fucking heated debate between like Piers Morgan back in the day and a vegan or something. What's getting more views? Always the fierce debate, always the one where they're probing and questioning maybe a former criminal, or they get former gang members to speak on about knife violence, etc. It always gets more clicks, it gets more views. So naturally, journalists are going to target fucking stories that are either sad or are either going to make people angry, make people click, or shock people, etc. Because that's what's going to get them more traction. And from a normal consumer like you or I, all you see is either stories about negativity, or the stories that aren't negative will be about like fucking reality TV stars that you don't give a shit about. Like, do you know what I mean? Like that is what news is now a lot of the time. It's negative shit in the news with your odd story about fucking Joey Essex or Tommy Fury and his missus having a baby, except like it's shit that you don't care about. There's not much happiness in the news. And like you just said, it is because they get more clicks, get more views, get more buyers.
I suppose it comes down to if you look at it from an evolutionary point of view, but you think how far like we've come in the past 100 years, our lives are so much more comfortable. There isn't actually any immediate danger in most people's lives. So, but most people are still hardwired to think, look for danger, look for something. You're like, what could go wrong? But instead of things actually going wrong, you just look for shit that's wrong instead. And you're almost getting that, what's the fucking like feed of it. It's like, it's satisfying that craving of like, okay, you're looking at what is going wrong in the world. So then you can be like, okay, cool, I should avoid that, instead of like, oh, do you know what? Life's actually pretty good at the moment. Like I just said to you a minute ago, there's this guy called, I had to write his name down, Hans Rosling. He's wrote a book called Factfulness, that's it. And it's about, he basically, like the first bit in it, I just read this on this website called Goodreads. I haven't read the actual book yet. I might get it. It's basically saying like humans' biggest advantage is also like their biggest undoing in the modern world. It's the fact that we are so good at making advancements, making everything so much better. It's also made everything so much worse, that people view things as so much worse. It's like if you compare life to 50 years ago, more people have access to shelter, more people have access to running water, more people are living longer, there's less infant mortality rate, advancements in medicine, technology, like communication, there's less wrongdoings and things like that. People have more rights in most of the world. I know we've just sat there and talked about all that, but in most of the world, and it's like I said, it's just people because life is now so comfortable. So once people are like searching out the bad shit. Because it's like, oh shit, life is so comfortable. It feels wrong that it's this comfortable. What can I look for that's not comfortable?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think people also just enjoy it. Like, you know, like the Dharma series on Netflix. Oh, yeah. And do you remember they made one about Dennis Nilsson? He basically did the same shit as Dharma, but up in Scotland. They make these documentaries, and people are so like fascinated by it, and it gets viewed so much. Because pretty much like what you just said, you look for like wrong shit, and that's what I think intrigues a lot of people, shit like that. You don't want to watch some happy, like when I look for a series, for example, to watch, I rarely watch like comedy series, because when I watch something I want it to be like serious and like a thriller or a drama or something like that. And that's the same as, in the media, it's the same sort of thing with you're not looking for much happiness, or even if you are looking for happiness in the media, you can't really find it, because most of the stuff is negative that's going on in the world. But I also think on that same point, at the moment we are just in a position where if you compare now to the last 10, 15 years, there is just a lot more bad shit happening today than there was back then, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, with the fucking cost of living crunch and the economic uncertainty moving forward. That worries people, and there's so many articles about petrol prices and the cost of living crunch and stuff. With the Qatar World Cup, obviously there's stuff about that, and I feel like probably just today there probably is just a bit more negative shit to write about than perhaps 5-10 years ago.
So, but then in previous years we've been through recessions,
but not when technology's been like this. That's the point. Is while technology's been like this, Like back in our recession before was in like what 2008 from like 2008 to 2010 maybe. Obviously Twitter and stuff was there, Facebook was there by that point, but it wasn't as widely used as it is now. Like stuff online, a lot of the news stuff wasn't on YouTube, it was just on BBC and ITV, etc. So
then does that come down to like the coverage of it? Yeah, that's like recessions. Was we in Iraq in that 15? Yeah. It's only been the past few years that people have started to pull out, haven't we? That was a huge war, huge war. That wasn't just two countries, and I suppose there's civil wars going on in other places, and that
didn't affect us. How that affected us was sending soldiers there. Yeah. With I think the reason that the Russian thing has affected the rest of the world is because A, they sell oil to a lot of the rest of the world, and B, there's a lot of businessmen who live in the UK who are Russian, etc., that have had their assets seized and stuff. Whereas invading like Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff, there wasn't that same thing. We didn't have like trade deals set up with Afghanistan and that with Iraq. We weren't buying oil from them already. We didn't have their billionaires sitting in London in their penthouse suites with buildings that they own. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just slightly different, I think, to, let's say, for example, I don't know, a country that we don't really deal with at all. If one of those piped up in a war was between that country and another country we don't really deal with, would there be as much coverage on it? Probably not, because it's not.
But then that's not to say it's not just as bad in in sense of like the fallout of it, like what's happening to those two countries. And that's what I'm not saying bad things obviously do happen. Just trying to put a bit of there is, if you was to look overall, these are like isolated events that are happening right now, but then those sort of things happen. There's more occurrences of those sort of things. It just maybe didn't have such a global impact, or it didn't have an impact on, I suppose we was a lot younger then, so wouldn't have fucking noticed it anyway. But because it's not happening in your front door, are you oblivious to it? But yeah, I just thought that was quite an interesting thing. I remember hearing about that book ages ago, and I'm not saying that everyone's life's fucking hunky-dory, because it's not. There is a lot of shit going on in the world, but statistically speaking, the world is actually a much better place to live in, even 20 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. But the trouble is, and things do get better. But right now, people are worried. Right now, people do think the world's shit because of the economic uncertainty and stuff. In a couple of years, it will turn back up. Where there are down times, there are always up as well. And where there's a recession, you come out of the recession at some point, you know what I mean? And where things are currently looking a bit shaky, it will go up again, and it has happened before in every country. Every country goes down and up. You're never just up on a high all the time, and the trouble is when you're up on a high, it hurts much more when you go back down again. But you do get through it, and while there is a lot of negativity in the world at the moment, and while I get what you're saying about stuff being statistically better than they were 20 years ago or whatever, I do just think that people are worried for valid reasons, and the fact that the world's better now than it was back then doesn't make much of a difference to them now. But I do think at the same time, like I say, shouldn't just be negative about it constantly, because things will get better, and you can still find positives in your day. If you've had a good day, for example, you can still find positives in your day, and things will get better. It's just at the moment, it's a bit of a shaky one in the UK.
You look for the little wins, innit? And that's like an overgeneralization of it. Like there is still, and yeah, people are very like rightly so. You've got to be worried about. There are some people that need to like, how am I going to cover my bills, this, that, and the other. But like you said, there's highs and lows of it, and it's. I'm not just talking about money and things like that. I suppose it's from a mindset point of view. It's like, because it's shit now. It's do you remember me saying the other week about that hot cold empathy gap? Like, because it's shit now, you can even though it was quite good a few years ago. People on average, like people were doing better, weren't as many worries, sort of thing. It's now shit. So I can't. You forget what it was like, and you forget that it could be like that again in the future. And you forget there's more things you could be doing to try and have a bit more of a positive outlook. And I think as well, I'm not saying fucking everything's mindset. There's a lot of like, some people are dealt a shit hand, and there's a lot of luck, and some people are very unlucky. But I think the more you just look at things in a shit situation, the more that situation's going to be shit, and it's going to become worse.
But that's the thing, right? And what we're talking about here with the media doesn't help, because say you are worried about your job, or, you know, I listen to Heart Radio on the way to work each day. And I think Amanda Holden just did a 3 Peaks challenge for charities that Heart works with, small charities. So she was raising money for charity, and they've had people on from the various charities that do different things, and they've had people on who help, you know, single parents, for example, who are in need of money for a school uniform or whatever and can't cover the bills. Perhaps a victim of domestic abuse who's had to leave their long-time husband or wife with the kids. They may not have a job and they get funding and support, clothes, bedding, etc., money. And I've heard a few stories on there, and obviously people are really worried about the economic downturn at the moment, and people are worried about losing their jobs if there's a recession, not being able to buy their kids school uniforms, etc. And I do think the media doesn't then help, because you switch on the TV and it's saying like Liz Truss's new finance bill is going to put us into a recession. It's saying about that Quasimodo bloke that you heard all about him. Her finance man or something is called Quasi something, and one of the papers called him Quasimodo. But then you've got like him talking about the mini budget they've set aside, and there's the Labour MPs ridiculing it, saying you're literally going to put us into a recession. The interest rates are going like this. You can't get a mortgage. Cost of living's going up. So when you have those worries, it's so difficult as a normal person when you're then seeing all this media crap around you to see any positives, to see any benefits, because you are worried already, and that's not helping. But likewise, that they probably should be reporting on that sort of thing. The country should probably know that there are troubles ahead, and the country probably shouldn't just be seeing everything's fine when behind it there's a fire. You know, like the meme picture of the girl there smiling when there's a fire in the background. Like, so I get it, and I just think if, you know, for people who are worried and stuff, steer clear of the news, because the news is often a very negative place.
That's, you know, it's good to keep up on current affairs and shit like that, but yeah, it is. It's just it's just an awful place to go. And again, it's that you say you're worried about money, and you see something. Liz Truss has just made these tax cuts and it's put the pound into the shitter. You read that and you're like, fuck. Like, I've got mortgage to pay, interest rates are going up, like skyrocketing, and then you look at the next story and it's like some geezer's been murdered down the road, and you're like, fuck, now I can't even go outside my house without being worried. Look at the next story, bombs are dropping in Ukraine, and you're like, oh shit, now you feel even worse because you can't do anything about it. And yeah, it's my view on the media. I think that it's a source of a lot of that's what like I said a minute ago, is one of the big reasons I just don't enjoy it. I don't even like, it's like Twitter. I think Twitter's a fucking awful place for it as well.
Yeah, it is. I do enjoy.
I'm not saying any social media platform's great for it, but
I enjoy reading the news, watching the news, staying up with current events, etc., looking into politics and stuff. But if I was feeling that worried about life at the moment, and I was fed up of seeing negative shit constantly, the news is probably something I would stop looking at. I think it's good to stay up to date with everything and be in the know about what's going on around, whether it is politics or whether it's war or whether it's the economy. I think it's good to keep up with that sort of stuff. But like I say, if you're in the mood for something positive, then don't be looking at the news. Stick on the in-betweeners, you know.
It's, I think, like, part of that is, I mean, if fair enough, you're like, cool, catch up with current events, and it's like, you get a bit worried of something. It's like, okay, cool, what are you going to do about it, though? Like, what are you going to do to make yourself unworried? Is there something you could then implement? Even if it's not necessarily going to solve that issue straight away, you take your mind off it.
Fucking, like, eat some ice cream.
Do you know, okay, right, so, what's that geezer's name? I want to say it's Martin Lewis, and I know it's not. The money advice guy.
Yeah, Martin Lewis.
Oh, it is Martin Lewis. Okay, we won't cut that bit out.
Money saving expert.
Yeah.
Martin Lewis.
So it's got, like, say you watch loads of shit and you're like, oh fuck, things are getting really tight. Then just go. It's come from a point of privilege, I suppose. But then you gotta look into things. Okay, how can we save a bit more money? Because then you can kind of set those negative thoughts to one side and be like, okay, cool, I've got a plan going forward. Because it's obviously like, I think it's human. Everyone's going to get pissed off, have negative thoughts, be drawn to negative shit. And everyone, like, yeah, I'll get fucking wound up all the time. I'm not Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky. But then it's, yeah, you just got, I think, I always try and find, like, is there something to be done with it? Is there something I can do about it personally? If you can't do anything about it, then fucking don't stop thinking about it.
Particularly with, like, say, parents at the moment or people with mortgages worried about the economic situation, worried about covering bills, etc. People should literally research what they're entitled to by the government, because so many people don't, because they think, well, I'm not entitled to any benefits, I've got a job, blah 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 blah. But you can get things like, if you earn under a certain amount, even if it is enough to cover your rent, and your rent is X, there are always things available like universal credit. Universal credit isn't just given to people who don't have a job. If you have a job and you don't earn over a certain threshold, you're entitled to some universal credit. And even if it's £100 a month, £200 a month, it's still going to help you do something at the end of the day. And people should look up what's available to them by charities, what's available to them by the government, because I think a lot of people probably don't want to ask for help as well. And going back to one of the women being interviewed on Heart about, she had a husband who was violent with her and the kids, and he eventually got sent to prison, but he was the one who worked. She was then a single mum trying to do everything by herself, and she was like, I was so happy that the charity actually approached me, because someone must have told them about her, because she was like, I never would have approached anyone, I never would have wanted to ask for help, I was embarrassed, blah blah blah. So people sometimes do need to swallow their pride and find out what is out there for them from a charity service or from the government, to actually see what help is available to them, because there is help. And I don't claim to say that the help is going to get them through necessarily, or the help is the best in the world, because some of it is probably shit. And you might make an application for universal credit and they say like, oh, you're getting £20 a month, and you might think, well, that's fuck all. So it might not work for everyone, but it's certainly worth having a look, I think, for, especially with the current economic situation and people being worried about it naturally.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be like financial advisor or nothing. Because yeah, it's a pride and an embarrassment thing. It's like, because especially like at this moment in time, I suppose a lot of people have gone from living fairly like financially stable lives to thinking, fuck, like, am I going to put food on the table? And it must be an absolute kick in the teeth to fucking have to go from that point to that point and not know what to do. But there are things you can do. I feel like it's turning into a money advice podcast. Well, I ain't got kids. I ain't got like a mortgage to pay or nothing. I'm not saying that. But yeah, I just think in life in general, it's, the more, manifesting is. I'm not too into that. I think it's a lot of it's a load of bollocks. But you manifest more negative thoughts, more negative shit tends to happen. How many people do you know that are the most miserable fucking people? All they're ever doing is moaning about how shit their life is, how nothing ever happens for them and all this. And how you look at their life and think, yeah, do you know what? That is pretty crap. Because all you're ever doing is fucking moaning about it instead of doing something about it. I'm not saying about people now having to try and put food on the table. It's completely different, different topic.
On that same point though about the pride thing, it is pride. Like at the start of COVID, I got made redundant from our company like 3 years ago, whenever it was, 2.5 years ago. A load of people did on the same day at my company because of COVID. And first thing, like my mum, Marie's mum, etc., said to me was apply for universal credit, and I was just like, I'll just look for a job. Looked for a job for a few weeks and then thought, oh fuck it, I'll apply. Got like £300 a month until I got a job again. So I was on that for like 2-3 months, and that felt shit doing it. But they were just, my mum and Ree's mum were just like, but it's available to you. It's an option that's there, that you're eligible now. As you've been made redundant, you're eligible for that from the government, so why not take it? It will help you get a bit of money, it will tide you over until you get another job. Do it. And I did it, and it was fine. They were well nice about it. They asked a bit about your circumstance, etc. And then even when I got a job, I remember I literally said to the woman I'd been dealing with, like, oh, I won't need this anymore, blah blah blah, I've got a job. And she called me and she literally said to me, how much are you earning? So I said, oh, I'm earning this. And she said, oh, never mind, I thought I'd give you a call, because just to let you know, just because you have a job, you can still be entitled to it if you earn over. I earned over the threshold, obviously, but she literally had phoned me to let me know that if you're not earning over this, we'll still pay you money, which I thought was really, really helpful. So there are these things out there, and it is a pride thing, and it is an embarrassment thing, but everyone needs fucking help sometimes. Yeah. And as a single parent in particular, I'm sure even parents who both work struggle as well, but as a single parent in particular, everyone fucking struggles. And if there's help out there that is offered to you, take it. And you shouldn't feel bad about it, because there's probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of other people in the UK feeling the same as you that are getting help from the government. So why shouldn't you? That's
fit. Right. Obviously, we've both grown up with mums that like single mums for a certain period of our life. I don't know what my mum used to. I know my mum used to work her ass off, like doing actual like work, not just raising me and my sister, job enough as it is. But yeah, like I can imagine she probably did get some sort of help at some point. Like you need it.
I remember my mum, like you just said. I remember even my mum selling jewelry at one point in our lives as a single mum because she was struggling a bit. And I think that was actually during that 2008 time recession. But like I'm pretty sure she got money from the government, even though she had a full-time job because she was a single parent. Obviously, you would have got a bit of help from the government every now and then, etc. And yeah, it's hard as a fucking single mum because, like you say, it's working full time and then raising two kids like me and my brother, just like your mum did with you and your sister. It's basically a full time job in itself. And every fucking year, especially with you, didn't grow a lot, but
I had a bit of a growth spurt at one point.
With me and my brother, obviously, every single year she had to buy a new rugby kit, new school uniform, new this, new that, because we didn't stay in clothes for too long at any point during our childhood, right?
Mate, I wasn't that fucking small. I didn't grow out a school uniform.
You stopped going at 12. But yeah, things are hard, and you know, it is a task being a single parent to raise your kids plus work and try and put food on the table. See what help is available out there, I'd say.
And I wasn't even kind of talking about the whole having a bit more of a positive attitude when I started talking about that, but it does apply that there is help out there, and it's just looking for that help.
Thinking positively does help. I don't think that positively often, but when I do, I do notice it. Yeah, you are in a better mood, and even if it's something that's without your control, like out of your control entirely, it does actually sometimes help. I find like shit's happened to me that is just not in my control, and I sit there and get pissed off about it. And then I actually think, right, what else am I going to do now? Not even necessarily about that exact topic, but what else am I going to do to make myself happy about something else? Or you find something else that's going to make you happy. Or if you've lost income from there, you find it from there. And if you have to cut back on that spending and spend on something else, like it, you just sort of navigate ways around it and try and be positive.
And that's it. And fair enough, it's not always so black and white, but it is kind of,
and it's hard at the moment.
My personal opinion on it, I'm sure there's a lot of people that disagree with me, but it's like, say shit situations happened, what can you do about it? Like here and now, what can you do? Like, is there something that you could personally be doing to make that situation better? If not, like if there is literally nothing you can do and it's out of your control, why are you giving it like attention? Why are you putting so much thought? Because then all that time and effort you're putting into that could be spent doing something that actually could make your life better.
And you can't always, but a lot of the time it does help.
No, so it's not so black and white.
Right, that's it. Cheers to episode 8.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it.